Commander Zeftar stood tall on the bridge of his massive warship and looked at the blue planet spinning slowly in front of him. His red eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he studied the primitive world. The Crimson Dawn was the largest ship in the Valerian fleet, and it carried enough firepower to destroy entire cities. Zeftar had conquered 17 different worlds in his long military career, and this one would be no different. The planet was called Earth by its inhabitants, and they called themselves humans. Zeftar had read the intelligence reports about these creatures. They had only recently learned to travel between stars, and their weapons were basic compared to Valerian technology. Their ships were small and weak, and their soldiers carried simple projectile weapons. The Valerians had plasma cannons that could melt through any known armor and energy shields that could stop any attack. Zeftar touched the communication panel on his command chair. "Send the surrender demand to the human leadership," he ordered his communications officer. The message was simple and direct. Earth would surrender immediately and become a colony of the Valerian Empire. The humans would be allowed to live, but they would serve their new masters. Resistance would result in complete destruction on Earth. Admiral Jake Morrison was sitting in his office at the Pentagon drinking his morning coffee when the alert came through. The deep space monitoring stations had detected unknown ships entering the solar system. Jake was a veteran of many conflicts, but he had never faced anything like this. The ships were huge, and they moved with purpose toward Earth. Jake called an emergency meeting with the Earth Defense Council. The room filled quickly with military leaders from around the world. Captain Lisa Turner was there representing the space fleet. She was young, but she had proven herself in several dangerous missions beyond Earth's orbit. Her ship, the UES Defiance, was the most advanced vessel humanity had ever built, but even she knew it was nothing compared to what was coming. The alien message arrived 3 hours later. It appeared on every screen on Earth at the same time. A tall creature with red skin and 4 arms spoke in perfect English. "I am Commander Zeftar of the Valerian Empire. Your world is now claimed by our empire. You will surrender immediately or face total destruction. You have 1 day to respond." Jake looked around the room at the other leaders. Fear was clear on many faces, but also determination. Colonel Ryan Hayes spoke first. He commanded the fighter squadrons that protected Earth's orbital stations. "We can't just give up without a fight," he said. "These aliens might be advanced, but they don't know what humans are capable of when we're threatened." Captain Turner nodded in agreement. "My ship and crew are ready for battle. We might not win, but we'll show them that Earth won't surrender easily." She had studied the alien ships through long-range sensors, and she knew the odds were terrible. But something inside her refused to accept defeat without trying. Major Kate Sullivan was in charge of planetary defense. She had been planning for possible alien invasion for years, even though most people thought it would never happen. "We need to start evacuating the major cities immediately," she said. "If we're going to fight, we need to protect as many civilians as possible." Dr. Alex Carter had been studying the limited data they had about the aliens. He was Earth's leading expert on xenobiology, even though he had never seen a real alien before. Today, "These Valerians seem to follow some kind of military code," he reported. "Their previous conquests show a pattern. They demand surrender, then attack if refused. But they also seem to prefer quick, decisive battles rather than long campaigns." Jake made the decision that would change everything. He stood up and activated the global communication system. His message went out to every human on Earth and in the colonies. "This is Admiral Morrison. We have received a demand for surrender from an alien empire. My response is simple. Earth will never surrender. We will fight for our freedom and our right to exist as an independent species." The message also went out to the Valerian fleet. Captain Turner added her own words. "Commander Zeftar, you want our world, then come and take it. But know that every inch of ground and every ship you face will be defended by humans who would rather die than live as slaves." Zeftar received the human response while reviewing battle plans with his officers. He was not surprised by their refusal, but he was amused by their defiance. These primitive creatures actually thought they could resist the might of the Valerian Empire. He had seen this before on other worlds. The inhabitants would fight bravely, for a few days, then surrender when they realized how hopeless their situation was. Prepare the fleet for attack, Zeftar commanded. We will show these humans the price of defying the Empire. Begin with their orbital defenses, then move to surface bombardment. Follow standard conquest protocol. The Valerian fleet moved into attack formation. 300 massive warships spread out across space in perfect military precision. Each ship carried enough firepower to level mountains, and their shields could withstand anything the humans might throw at them. Zeftar expected the battle to be over within a week. Captain Turner watched the approaching fleet from the bridge of the Defiance. Earth's entire space navy consisted of only 50 ships, and most of them were much smaller than the alien vessels. But Turner had no intention of backing down. She opened a channel to all human ships. "This is Captain Turner. Today we make our stand. Fight hard and make them pay for every inch. Show them what humans can do." The first shots were fired as Earth's defense platforms opened up with everything they had. The first battle was a complete disaster for humanity. Zeftar watched from his command chair as human missiles bounced harmlessly off Valerian energy shields. The primitive weapons exploded against the barriers like fireworks against a mountain. His plasma cannons responded with devastating effect, and human ships were torn apart in seconds. Metal and flame scattered across space as the Defiance and her escort vessels tried desperately to fight back. Captain Turner gripped her command chair as explosions rocked her ship. The bridge lights flickered, and sparks flew from damaged control panels. "Damage report," she shouted over the noise of alarms. Her weapons officer reported that their main guns were doing no damage to the alien shields. Their missiles were being destroyed by some kind of defensive system before they could even reach their targets. "All ships pull back to defensive positions around the orbital platforms," Turner ordered. But it was too late for many of her vessels. The UES Courage exploded in a ball of fire as 3 Valerian ships focused their weapons on it. The UES Guardian lost its engines and drifted helplessly as alien fighters swarmed around it like angry insects. Colonel Ryan Hayes led his fighter squadron in a desperate attack against the alien capital ships. His pilots were the best Earth had, but their small craft seemed like toys compared to the massive Valerian vessels. "Target their weapon systems," Hayes called out over the radio. "Maybe we can disable some of their guns." The fighters darted between the huge alien ships, firing everything they had. But their weapons barely scratched the Valerian armor. Enemy point defense systems tracked the small craft with deadly accuracy. Hayes watched in horror as pilot after pilot was shot down. Sarah Kim screamed over the radio as her fighter was hit by plasma fire. The small craft disintegrated instantly, leaving nothing but debris. Hayes himself barely escaped when his fighter was targeted by 6 different weapon systems at once. He rolled and dove, trying to avoid the incoming fire, but his craft was hit in the engine section. Warning lights flashed red across his control panel as he struggled to maintain control. "All remaining fighters retreat to the inner defense perimeter," he ordered. Of his original squadron of 24 fighters, only 8 remained on the surface. Major Kate Sullivan watched the battle through the feeds from orbital cameras. The sight of human ships being destroyed so easily made her stomach turn, but she had her own job to do. Air raid sirens wailed across major cities as civilians fled to underground shelters. The evacuation plans she had developed were being put to the test. "Sir, the aliens are beginning orbital bombardment," reported her aide, Lieutenant Danny Price. The young officer pointed to the tactical display, showing energy beams lancing down from space. The first targets were military installations and government buildings. The Pentagon was hit by a plasma beam that melted through its walls like butter. The building collapsed in seconds, taking decades of military planning with it. Sullivan coordinated the evacuation efforts from an underground command center in Colorado. Reports came in from around the world as Valerian ships began systematic bombardment of major population centers. New York, London, Tokyo, and dozens of other cities were under attack. The alien weapons were precise and devastating. They could target individual buildings while leaving others untouched. Dr. Alex Carter was in the command center analyzing the few intact pieces of alien technology they had managed to recover. A Valyrian fighter had been shot down over Nevada, and its wreckage was being studied by teams of scientists. Carter examined the alien pilot's body with growing amazement. The creature was over 7 feet tall with red skin and 4 arms. Its equipment was incredibly advanced, but also showed signs of ritualistic decoration. Their approach to warfare seems very formal, Carter reported to the military leaders. Look at these weapons. They're incredibly powerful, but they're also decorated, with symbols and markings. This isn't just about conquest for them. War seems to be some kind of art form or ceremony. The Valyrian ground invasion began on the 3rd day. Massive transport ships descended through Earth's atmosphere carrying troops and war machines. The alien soldiers were tall and proud, marching in perfect formation. Their vehicles were enormous walking machines that stood over buildings like metal giants. Each war machine carried enough firepower to level city blocks. Zeftar observed the invasion with satisfaction. His troops were performing exactly as expected. The humans had put up more resistance than usual, but the outcome was never in doubt. Most species surrendered after the first major defeat, but these humans seemed determined to continue fighting despite the hopeless odds. It was admirable in a primitive way, but ultimately pointless. The first ground battle took place outside Chicago, where Lieutenant Commander Ben Parker led a battalion of Marines against the alien landing force. Parker was a veteran of special operations who had fought in conflicts around the world. But nothing had prepared him for the sight of alien war machines towering over the battlefield like mechanical mountains. "Target their legs," Parker shouted to his men. "Those machines have to have weak points somewhere." The Marines fired rocket launchers and anti-tank weapons at the Valyrian walkers, but their shots bounced off the alien armor. The war machines responded with plasma cannons that melted through concrete and steel. Like Water Parker's battalion was forced to retreat after losing half their men in the first hour. The aliens advanced methodically, destroying any resistance they encountered. Their tactics were efficient and professional, but they also seemed to follow some kind of code. They didn't target civilians who weren't fighting, and they didn't destroy buildings unless they contained military forces. Captain Nina Rodriguez organized resistance cells in the occupied territories. She was a former Army Ranger who specialized in guerrilla warfare. Her small teams began hitting Valyrian supply convoys and communication posts. The aliens seemed confused by these tactics. They were used to facing organized armies, not small groups of fighters who struck without warning then disappeared. The resistance fighters learned to avoid direct confrontation with Valyrian forces. Instead, they focused on sabotage and harassment. Rodriguez's teams planted explosives on alien supply routes and disabled their communication equipment. The Valyrians responded by increasing security, but they seemed unwilling or unable to adapt their tactics to counter guerrilla warfare. Zeftar began to feel the first hints of concern as reports came in about the human resistance activities. His previous conquests had never involved this kind of continued fighting after the main battle was won. Most species accepted defeat and tried to negotiate terms for surrender, but these humans seemed incapable of accepting that they had lost. The war was supposed to be over by now, but human forces continued to fight from hidden bases and underground bunkers. They had lost most of their major cities, and their space fleet was destroyed, but somehow they kept fighting. Zeftar studied reports of human tactics with growing puzzlement. These creatures seemed to treat war differently than any species he had encountered before. Lieutenant Commander Ben Parker stood in the ruins of what used to be Chicago looking at the twisted metal remains of a Valyrian war machine. His Special Forces team had managed to bring down the giant walker using improvised explosives and sheer determination. The alien machine had been designed to fight traditional armies, not small groups of soldiers who could think and adapt quickly. Parker had spent weeks studying Valyrian tactics, and he had noticed something important. The aliens were incredibly powerful, but they were also predictable. They followed the same patterns in every battle, using overwhelming force to crush resistance. But what if humans stopped trying to fight them the way they expected? We need to change everything about how we fight, Parker told the other surviving military leaders during a secret meeting in an underground bunker. These aliens are used to facing armies that fight like armies. They don't know how to deal with enemies who refuse to follow the rules. Colonel Ryan Hayes nodded in agreement. His remaining pilots had been conducting hit-and-run attacks against Valerian supply lines. My fighters have been hiding in asteroid fields and attacking their convoys when they least expect it. The aliens seem confused when we don't stay and fight. They're used to big space battles, not guerrilla warfare. The new strategy began to take shape in the weeks that followed. Human forces would no longer try to meet the Valerians in direct battle. Instead, they would use their knowledge of Earth's terrain and their smaller size to strike where the aliens were weakest, then disappear before reinforcements could arrive. Captain Nina Rodriguez had already been using these tactics with her resistance cells. Her teams had learned to move through underground tunnels and abandoned buildings, staying hidden from Valerian patrols. The key is to make them waste resources hunting for us, she explained. Every soldier they have to use for security is one less soldier they can use for conquest. The space battles changed completely under the new tactics. Captain Lisa Turner survived the first battle and was given command of the remaining human fleet. Instead of trying to protect fixed positions, her ships began operating like raiders. They would hide in the asteroid belt or behind the moons of Jupiter, then strike at Valerian supply ships when they were alone and vulnerable. Turner's new flagship was much smaller than the destroyed Defiance, but it was also faster and harder to detect. The UES Shadow could slip past Valerian sensors and hit enemy transports before they knew they were under attack. "We can't fight their main fleet," Turner told her captains. "But we can make it impossible for them to supply their forces on Earth." The hit-and-run attacks began to have an effect. Valerian supply convoys started traveling with heavy escorts, which meant fewer ships were available for other missions. The aliens had to divert resources to hunt for human raiders instead of focusing on conquest. Zeftar found himself dealing with problems he had never faced before. "Commander, we have lost another supply convoy near Mars," reported his intelligence officer. "The humans attacked from the asteroid field, then vanished before our patrol ships could respond. This is the 5th attack this week." Zeftar studied the tactical displays with growing frustration. His empire had rules and traditions for warfare that had worked for thousands of years. Enemies were supposed to fight with honor, using their full strength in decisive battles. But these humans seemed to have no concept of honorable combat on Earth. The resistance was growing stronger every day. Major Kate Sullivan had established a network of underground bases connected by hidden tunnels and communication systems. Human forces could move beneath the surface, while Valerian troops controlled the cities above. It was like fighting a war, on two different levels. The aliens tried to flush out the resistance by increasing patrols and conducting searches, but the humans had advantages the Valerians didn't understand. They knew every building, every tunnel, and every hiding place. When Valerian troops entered a district looking for rebels, they found empty buildings and silent streets. But as soon as they left, the humans would emerge and strike at the next target, Dr. Alex Carter was working with salvage teams to recover alien technology from destroyed Valerian equipment. Every piece of wreckage was studied and analyzed. Slowly, the humans began to understand how alien weapons and shields worked. "Their technology is incredibly advanced," Carter reported, "but it's also very complex. They rely on automated systems that can be confused or overloaded." Engineer Tony Blake worked with Carter to reverse engineer captured Valerian equipment. They discovered that alien power systems operated on different principles than human technology, but they weren't impossible to understand. "If we can figure out how their shields work, we might be able to build weapons that can penetrate them," Blake said. The first breakthrough came when a team of scientists managed to activate a damaged Valerian energy shield. The device created a barrier that could stop human weapons, but it also had weaknesses. The shield couldn't handle certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, and it consumed enormous amounts of power human workshops hidden in caves and abandoned. Factories began producing new weapons based on captured alien technology. The first plasma rifles were crude copies of Valerian equipment, but they worked. Human soldiers finally had weapons that could damage alien armor and shields. Sergeant Mike Chen was one of the first soldiers to use the new weapons in battle. His squad ambushed a Valerian patrol in the ruins of Detroit using plasma rifles and improvised energy grenades. For the first time since the invasion began, human weapons actually hurt the aliens. "Target their communications equipment," Chen shouted as his men opened fire. The new plasma rifles cut through Valerian armor like it was paper. The aliens in the patrol seemed shocked that humans could hurt them. They had grown used to being nearly invulnerable. The Valerian patrol tried to call for backup, but Chen's team had already destroyed their communication gear. Without reinforcements, the aliens were forced to fight alone against an enemy that could now match their firepower. For the first time in the war, a Valerian ground force was completely destroyed by human fighters. News of the victory spread quickly through the resistance networks. Human morale, which had been crushed by months of defeat, began to recover. If Valerian troops could be killed, then they weren't invincible. The war might still be winnable. Zeftar received reports of the new human weapons with disbelief. Intelligence showed that the primitive species had somehow developed plasma technology in a matter of months. It should have taken them decades or centuries to achieve such advancement. How had they learned so quickly? "Sir, the humans are using our own technology against us," reported his science officer. "They have somehow copied our plasma weapons and energy shields. Their versions are crude, but they are effective enough to threaten our ground forces." For the first time since beginning, the conquest Zeftar felt a touch of uncertainty. These humans were unlike any enemy he had faced before. They didn't fight with honor or follow the accepted rules of warfare. Instead, they adapted and learned with frightening speed, turning every defeat into a lesson for future battles. Dr. Alex Carter barely slept anymore as he worked around the clock in his underground laboratory, studying captured Valerian technology. His team had managed to recover intact pieces of alien equipment from several destroyed ships and vehicles. Each discovery brought new understanding of how the enemy's advanced systems worked. The breakthrough came when engineer Tony Blake successfully powered up a complete Valerian energy core. The device hummed with incredible power, generating more energy than human fusion reactors while being only half the size. "This changes everything," Blake said as he studied the readouts. "If we can build these ourselves, we'll have power sources for weapons and ships that can match theirs." Carter's team worked with desperate urgency, knowing that every day they delayed meant more human deaths. They tore apart alien plasma cannons, component by component, learning how each part functioned. The technology was incredibly sophisticated, but it followed logical principles that human scientists could understand and copy. "Their plasma containment fields use a rotating magnetic matrix," reported Dr. Amy Foster, the team's physics expert. "We can build the same thing using modified superconductors and careful programming. It won't be as efficient as theirs, but it will work." The first human-built plasma cannon was tested in a hidden facility in the Rocky Mountains. The weapon fired a bolt of superheated energy that melted through 3 feet of steel armor. The scientists cheered as their creation proved that humans could match Valerian firepower. But building individual weapons was not enough. They needed to mass-produce the technology quickly. Tony Blake designed automated manufacturing systems that could build plasma weapons and energy shields using materials found in abandoned factories. The systems were crude compared to Valerian technology, but they could produce equipment fast enough to arm human resistance fighters around the world. Meanwhile, Commander Sarah Walsh was preparing the first human fleet equipped with the new hybrid technology. She had been promoted after Captain Turner was killed in a raid against a Valerian supply base. Walsh's ships were still smaller than enemy vessels, but they now carried weapons that could actually damage alien hulls and shields. The UES Vengeance was Walsh's flagship and the first human ship to mount captured Valerian energy shields. The alien defensive systems had been modified to work with human power sources and control systems. The shield wasn't as strong as the original, but it could stop Valerian plasma fire for short periods. All ships prepare for attack run, Walsh ordered, as her fleet approached a Valerian patrol group near the moon. This would be the first test of human ships with alien technology. Her 12 vessels faced 6 enemy ships that would have been impossible to fight just months earlier. The battle began as the Valerians detected the approaching human fleet. Enemy ships moved to intercept, expecting another easy victory like all their previous encounters. But this time, the humans had weapons that could fight back. Walsh's ships opened fire with their new plasma cannons. Bolts of energy struck Valerian, shields causing them to flicker and spark. The aliens seemed surprised that human weapons were actually affecting their defenses. Their return fire was stopped by the human energy shields, which held longer than expected. Target their weapon systems, Walsh commanded. Don't try to destroy them completely, just disable their ability to fight back. The new tactics focused on precise strikes rather than overwhelming force. Human ships were still outnumbered, so they had to be smarter than their enemies. The battle lasted for 2 hours instead of the usual minutes. Both sides exchanged fire while maneuvering for advantage. 2 human ships were destroyed, but they managed to disable 4 Valerian vessels before withdrawing. For the first time in the war, humans had won a space battle against superior numbers. On Earth, Sergeant Mike Chen was training resistance fighters to use the new plasma weapons. His unit had grown from a small squad to a full company as more volunteers joined the fight. The new weapons gave human soldiers confidence that they could actually hurt their enemies. Remember, these rifles generate a lot of heat, Chen instructed a group of new recruits. Fire in short bursts and let the weapon cool between shots, and always aim for their equipment first. A Valerian without weapons is just a big target. Chen's company was preparing for their largest operation yet. Intelligence reports indicated that a major Valerian command post had been established in the ruins of Denver. The facility coordinated alien operations across the western United States, and destroying it would cripple enemy communications in the region. The assault began at dawn with Chen's fighters using captured Valerian transport vehicles to approach the command post. The aliens had grown careless, assuming that humans couldn't threaten their secure facilities. The guards were caught completely off guard when plasma fire erupted from vehicles they thought were their own. Disable their communication arrays first, Chen shouted as his men stormed the facility. The new weapons cut through alien defenses like knives through paper. Valerian soldiers tried to organize a defense, but they were confused by the sudden attack from weapons that sounded and looked like their own. The battle for the command post lasted 3 hours. Chen's fighters used their knowledge of human military tactics combined with alien technology to devastating effect. They captured intact computer systems, communication equipment, and even a few enemy vehicles. Most importantly, they proved that humans could take and hold positions against Valerian forces. Zeftar received news of the defeat with growing alarm. The humans had somehow acquired Valerian military technology and were using it effectively in battle. His intelligence officers reported that enemy weapons were nearly identical to Imperial designs, but showed signs of rapid reverse engineering. "How is this possible?" Zeftar demanded. "These creatures barely understood space travel a year ago. Now they're building our weapons and using them against us. No species learns this quickly." His science advisor studied the reports with obvious concern. "Commander, the humans appear to have a natural ability for rapid technological adaptation. They can examine our equipment and understand its principles in months instead of decades. This has never been seen in any species we've encountered." The implications were disturbing. If humans could copy Valerian technology this quickly, then the Empire's advantages would disappear rapidly. Already human ships were beginning to match Imperial vessels in combat. Their ground forces were using captured weapons to great effect. The war that should have been over in weeks was now entering its 6th month with no end in sight. Captain Nina Rodriguez coordinated resistance operations from a mobile command center that moved constantly to avoid detection. Her network had grown to include cells in every occupied city and territory. The resistance now had access to alien weapons and equipment, which made their attacks much more effective. We need to focus on capturing intact technology, Rodriguez told her cell leaders. During a secure communication, every piece of equipment we take gives our scientists more knowledge about how their systems work. We're learning faster than they can adapt. The resistance attacks became more sophisticated as human fighters learned to use Valerian technology. They captured enemy vehicles and used them to infiltrate secure areas. They disabled alien communication systems and stole valuable intelligence. Most importantly, they began targeting the supply lines that kept the invasion force operating. Dr. Carter's research team achieved another breakthrough when they successfully activated a captured Valerian computer system. The alien databases contained detailed information about Imperial technology, military tactics, and even strategic plans. The intelligence was invaluable for understanding enemy capabilities and weaknesses. Their entire military doctrine is based on overwhelming technological superiority, Carter reported. They've never faced an enemy that could match their equipment. All their tactics assume they'll always have better weapons and defenses than their opponents. This knowledge allowed human commanders to predict Valerian moves and prepare effective counter-strategies. The aliens continued to follow their traditional battle plans even as humans adapted new technologies and tactics. It was becoming clear that the Empire's greatest weakness was their inability to change. The war entered a new phase that left Zeftar confused and disturbed by what he was witnessing. The humans had begun targeting Valerian civilian supply ships and support facilities. This violated every principle of honorable warfare that his species held sacred. Warriors fought warriors while civilians remained safe. But these humans seemed to make no distinction between military and non-military targets. Captain Danny Price led a squadron of human fighters equipped with captured Valerian cloaking devices. His mission was to destroy an alien fuel depot that supplied the invasion fleet. The facility was staffed by Valerian civilians who maintained the equipment and processed the energy supplies. Price felt no hesitation as he ordered the attack. "All fighters begin attack run," Price commanded. "Target the main storage tanks and processing equipment. Don't let anything remain functional." His pilots released their weapons with deadly precision. The fuel depot exploded in a massive fireball that could be seen from orbit. Hundreds of Valerian civilians died in the blast. When Zeftar received the report, he could barely believe what he was reading. "They attacked non-combatants," he said, to his aide. "Civilian technicians and workers. How can they call this warfare? This is butchery, not battle." The human attacks on civilian targets continued to escalate. Resistance fighter Laura Kim organized bombing campaigns against Valerian medical facilities and supply warehouses. The aliens used these bases to treat wounded soldiers and store equipment for their ground forces. Kim's teams destroyed them without mercy. "Every alien we kill is one less enemy we have to face," Kim told her bomb makers as they prepared explosive devices. "It doesn't matter if they're soldiers or workers. They're all part of the invasion force. They all have to be stopped." Diplomat Amy Foster was sent by the human leadership to attempt negotiations with the Valerian command. The meeting took place on a neutral station in orbit around Mars. Foster brought terms that she claimed were reasonable, but Zeftar found them incomprehensible. Total war. Foster explained when Zeftar questioned the human tactics. "We will use every resource and target every enemy asset until you surrender unconditionally. Your civilians, your supply lines, your communication networks, everything is a legitimate target. This is how humans fight when our survival is threatened." Zeftar struggled to understand the concept. "But there are rules to warfare, traditions that civilized species follow. You cannot simply ignore centuries of military protocol and attack. Defenseless beings." Foster's response chilled him to his core. "Commander, your people came to our world demanding surrender. You threatened to destroy our cities and enslave our population. You made this a war of survival. When humans fight for survival, there are no rules except victory at any cost." The negotiations failed completely. Zeftar could not accept terms that would require total Valerian withdrawal from human space. Foster refused to consider any agreement that left alien forces in the solar system. Both sides returned to their fleets knowing that the war would continue until one side was completely destroyed. Captain Danny Price's squadron began hunting Valerian hospital ships that carried wounded soldiers back to the Empire for treatment. The ships were clearly marked with medical symbols and carried no weapons. Under traditional warfare rules, they should have been safe from attack. But Price had his orders. Target their engines first, Price told his pilots as they approached another hospital ship. Disable them so they can't escape, then destroy the entire vessel. Leave no survivors. The attack was swift and merciless. The Valerian medical ship had no defenses against the human fighters. It exploded in silence, leaving only debris and frozen bodies floating in space. The wounded soldiers and medical staff aboard never had a chance to fight back on Earth resistance. Cells led by Laura Kim were using psychological warfare against Valerian occupation forces. They would attack alien patrols, then leave the bodies displayed in public areas with messages written in the Valerian language. The messages promised death to all invaders and their supporters. "Fear is our weapon," Kim explained to her cell leaders. "Make them afraid to leave their bases. Make them jump at every shadow. Every alien soldier who's too scared to fight effectively is a victory for us." The psychological campaign was having an effect. Valerian troops began requesting reassignment, away from Earth duty. Combat reports showed increasing nervousness and hesitation among alien ground forces. Some units refused to patrol certain areas where human attacks had been particularly brutal. Zeftar received disturbing reports about human treatment of prisoners. Captured Valerian soldiers were being interrogated using methods that violated every convention of civilized warfare. The humans seemed determined to extract information by any means necessary, regardless of the cost and suffering. "They torture our people for intelligence," reported his intelligence officer. "They use drugs, pain, and psychological pressure to break our soldiers. Some of our captured personnel have provided detailed information about our operations before dying from their treatment." The human approach to warfare was unlike anything in Valerian experience. They fought with a desperation and brutality that seemed to grow stronger the longer the conflict continued. Where other species would seek negotiation or surrender when faced with overwhelming odds, humans simply found new ways to inflict damage on their enemies. General Steve Martinez coordinated the final preparations for the largest human offensive of the war. His plan called for simultaneous attacks on every major Valerian position in the solar system. The goal was not just military victory, but complete destruction of the alien invasion force. "We're going to hit them everywhere at once," Martinez briefed his commanders. "Space stations, orbital platforms, supply depots, communication relays, everything they need to maintain their presence here. By the time we're finished, there won't be a single Valerian facility left functioning." The offensive began with coordinated strikes by human fleets throughout the solar system. Commander Sarah Walsh led the attack on the main Valerian battle group, while smaller squadrons hit supply convoys and isolated outposts. The humans had learned to fight like a swarm, attacking from multiple directions simultaneously. Sergeant Tracy, Young's boarding teams used captured Valerian equipment to breach the hulls of enemy ships. Once inside, they would fight their way to vital systems and plant explosives. The aliens found themselves facing enemies who knew their ships as well as they did and who fought with suicidal determination, plant the charges in the engine room. "And reactor compartments," Young ordered her team as they fought through a Valerian cruiser. "We need to make sure this ship never flies again. Kill anyone who tries to stop us, but focus on completing the mission." The human boarding teams showed no mercy to alien crew members. They had learned that Valerians would continue fighting even when their ships were crippled, so the only solution was to eliminate all resistance. Young's teams left no survivors as they moved through enemy vessels. Zeftar watched his fleet being torn apart by an enemy that fought without honor or restraint. Human ships rammed his vessels when their weapons failed. Human soldiers detonated explosives that killed themselves along with their enemies. These creatures seemed to prefer death over defeat. "Commander, we're receiving surrender requests from 6 of our ships," reported his communications officer. "They're asking permission to withdraw from the battle. It was unthinkable. Valerian warriors did not retreat from battle, but faced with an enemy that fought like demons, his crews were beginning to break." The humans had turned warfare itself into a weapon using fear and desperation to destroy his forces. President Kelly Davis authorized the deployment of weapons that made Zeftar question everything he thought he knew about warfare. The humans had developed biological agents specifically designed to target Valerian physiology. The weapons were released into the air systems of occupied cities where Valerian troops breathed them in unknowingly. The biological weapons attacked the aliens' nervous systems, causing paralysis and death within hours. Entire Valerian garrison units collapsed at their posts as the invisible killer spread through their ranks. The humans had turned the very air into a weapon that could not be stopped by armor or shields. Sir, we're receiving reports of massive casualties in the occupation zones, Zeftar's medical officer reported with obvious horror. Our troops are dying from some kind of biological attack. The symptoms suggest an engineered pathogen designed specifically for our species. Zeftar felt sick as he read the casualty reports. Thousands of Valerian soldiers were dead or dying from a disease that affected only his people. The humans had somehow learned enough about alien biology to create targeted biological weapons. It was a level of warfare that his civilization considered an abomination. Dr. Alex Carter's research teams had worked with samples of Valerian tissue to develop the biological agents. The work was morally questionable, but Carter justified it as necessary for human survival. We're fighting for the existence of our species, he told his scientists. If we don't use every weapon available, we'll all be slaves or corpses. The biological warfare was only the beginning of humanity's final assault. Tony Blake had developed computer viruses that could infiltrate Valerian technology and turn it against itself. The viruses spread through alien communication networks, causing ships to fire on each other and defense systems to attack their own facilities. Artificial intelligence systems created by human programmers began hacking into Valerian computers. The AIs were designed with one simple goal: destroy any alien technology they encountered. They spread like digital cancer through enemy networks, causing chaos and confusion throughout the invasion fleet. Commander, our communication systems are being attacked by some kind of intelligent virus, reported Zeftar's technology officer. It's rewriting our software and turning our own computers against us. Our ships are losing control of their navigation and weapon systems. The Valerian fleet began to tear itself apart as compromised computers caused friendly fire incidents. Ships collided with each other as navigation systems failed. Weapon platforms targeted their own vessels instead of human forces. The humans had weaponized information itself. General Steve Martinez coordinated the final ground assault against the remaining Valerian positions on Earth. His forces used psychological warfare that broke the morale of enemy troops before the battle even began. Human propaganda broadcasts filled Valerian communication channels with images of their dead comrades and promises of horrible death. Show them what we did to their friends, Martinez ordered his psychological warfare specialists. Make sure every alien soldier knows that surrender is not an option. They fight and die, or they die anyway. Those are their only choices. The propaganda included recordings of Valerian prisoners being interrogated and executed. The humans made sure that enemy troops could see and hear what happened to captured aliens. Fear spread through the remaining Valerian ground forces as they realized that humans took no prisoners. Sergeant Tracy Young led the final assault on Zeftar's flagship, the Crimson Dawn. Her boarding teams had fought through half the Valerian fleet to reach the command ship. They moved through the corridors like demons, killing any alien they encountered without hesitation or mercy. Secure the bridge and capture their commander, Young ordered her teams. We need him alive for intelligence purposes. Kill everyone else, but keep the commander breathing. The battle for the bridge was brutal and short. Valerian guards fought desperately to protect their leader, but they were overwhelmed by human soldiers who had nothing left to lose. Young's teams used captured alien weapons combined with human tactics to devastating effect. Zeftar watched his bridge crew die around him as human soldiers stormed his command center. These creatures fought with a savagery that seemed impossible. They showed no fear of death and no mercy for their enemies. When his personal guards fell, he found himself facing the human sergeant who had led the assault. "You are Commander Zeftar," Young stated rather than asked. "You're coming with us. You're going to tell us everything about your empire and how to find your homeworlds." Zeftar looked into the human's eyes and saw something that chilled him to his core. There was no anger or hatred there, only cold determination. This creature would do whatever was necessary to achieve victory regardless of the cost in blood or honor. "You have no understanding of civilized warfare," Zeftar said as human soldiers bound his arms. "You fight like animals without honor or restraint. How? Can you call yourselves intelligent beings when you wage war like savages?" Young's response haunted him for the rest of his life. "We fight to survive, Commander. When survival is at stake, there are no rules except winning. Your people made the mistake of threatening our existence. Now you're learning what humans are capable of when we have nothing left to lose. As human forces completed their conquest of the Valerian fleet, Zeftar was forced to record a message for any surviving Imperial forces. The humans wanted to send a warning to the rest of the Empire about what would happen to anyone who threatened Earth. "This is Commander Zeftar of the Crimson Dawn," he spoke into the recording device. "I am broadcasting this message under human coercion to warn all Valerian forces about the true nature of these creatures. We believed we understood warfare. We were wrong. We thought combat was about honor and tradition and following the rules of civilized conflict." Zeftar paused as he watched human soldiers dragging alien bodies through the corridors of his ship. These humans do not fight wars to gain territory or resources or even glory. They fight for survival, and that makes them capable of anything. They will use biological weapons, artificial intelligence, psychological torture, and mass murder. They will target civilians and prisoners and anyone who supports their enemies. The former commander continued his message as explosions echoed through the ship. Human demolition teams were destroying any Valerian technology they couldn't use themselves. They have turned warfare itself into a weapon. They use fear and desperation and the complete willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. No other species can match this level of total commitment to destruction. Zeftar's final words were barely audible over the sounds of his dying ship. "Never underestimate a species that treats survival as the only rule that matters. Never threaten the existence of creatures who are willing to become monsters to protect their home. The humans have shown us that there are fates worse than death, and they are willing to inflict those fates on anyone who stands against them." The war ended with the complete annihilation of the Valerian invasion force. Not a single alien ship escaped to report back to the Empire. The humans had demonstrated a capacity for warfare that transcended all previous understanding of military conflict. They had made war itself into their ultimate weapon. President Davis addressed the surviving population of Earth as the last Valerian positions were overrun. "We have won this war by becoming something we never wanted to be. We became ruthless and merciless and willing to do terrible things for survival. But we survived, and that is all that matters. Let any other species that thinks humans are weak remember what happened here.